Good afternoon. So it's 3 o'clock on this okay Thursday, looking out of my window over here. Great to have you with us this afternoon. My name's Deborah Dalton. I'm CEO of the Design Business Association, and you're joining us today for a really exciting webinar looking at effectiveness and effective design in business. It's a core subject for the DBA. It's at the heart of everything that we do, and we are very much the protagonists of how to lead and deliver effective design in business. And we have got a great session for you this afternoon. We all dream, don't we, of being involved in those transformation projects, those projects that have a lasting impact in the businesses, either that we're working in or the businesses that we work with, if we're an agency sitting outside of that business environment. And yet we continually struggle, don't we, to make the case for design, particularly at a strategic level within our organisations. And so we've got a session today that looks at how you might do that. How do you make the case for investing in design across an organisation? And then how do you support those people who need to be able to make those decisions within the organisations that you're working with? Now, you could be working in a myriad of areas. From we've seen everything from apps that save the NHS money to those types of customer experiences that fundamentally change the way that a brand works with its customers, say in high street banks. And design touches these organisations in all sorts of ways and at sort of all sorts of different levels, at different depths. And so it's quite a complex thing to integrate, isn't it, into an organisation. So when it can touch customer experience, product design, brand transformation, how people feel about your brand, to how you might innovate around your services, it's no surprise that we struggle to make the case for it. It's a complex thing to do, but it can and does deliver. We've seen that over 35 years of running the DBA Design Effectiveness Awards, and our website is littered with case studies that have successfully made the case for design. But it's something that I think we have to keep revisiting. We can become complacent about it. I think there's a danger sometimes that we do these things and kind of pull away without looking at the impact and the legacy of the work that we've undertaken. And that's part of what we want to discuss today. So how do you do that when you're working in vastly different industry sectors? And again, this might be from the perspective of you as a designer in-house, and the organisation and the industry sector that you're working in, to you as a designer sitting in an agency and looking into multiple industry sectors from the point of view of the type of work that you do and who you're working with. We've got two fantastic speakers. I'm going to ask them to join me on screen now for you this afternoon. So we've got Cheryl Calverly, who's CEO of Eve Sleep. I'm going to come back to the intros in just a moment, and Olivia Salisbury, who is Group VP of Digital at T. Rowe Price. And I don't think we could have found two more divergent sectors for you this afternoon. So we really are going to give you an insight into how design works in different areas, in different industry sectors. And we're not handing this to you on a plate today. The idea is that you go away, have a think about what our speakers have said, and look at how you might be able to work better within your own organisations or with your clients in helping them make the case for design. So Cheryl and Olivia, welcome. Great to have you both here this afternoon. Thank you for joining us.
Good to be here.
Thank you.
Great. And I'm going to ask you both to kick off with a bit of an introduction about yourselves. So Cheryl, if we can come to you first, a little bit about your business, your role in the business, and how you came about to be where you are today.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Cheryl. I'm the CEO of a sleep wellness business called Eve Sleep, and sleep wellness is one of those terms which I think will become a much more important term over time. And historically, business was a mattress business, a mattress D2C, one of those many that people have had chasing them around Facebook and this side of buses and in the tube. We're evolving to become much more of a broad sleep wellness business. My background, I was a CMO before I was a CEO. My background is largely in big corporate across Unilever, Birdseye, the AA, that sort of stuff. And I came to Eve to do something a little bit different, a little bit more nascent, and do some building of stuff.
Great, thank you. And Olivia, tell us a bit about you, where you've come from and where you are now.
Sure. So I'm Olivia Salisbury and I head up design and digital at T. Rowe Price. T. Rowe who, I hear you say. We are an American asset management firm. We're actually one of the largest in the world. And to put it into context, we run about $1 trillion of assets of our clients in our current state. What that means is we have a very large ambition to help improve the overall wealth of individuals across the globe. So we see it as our duty to use asset management, which is basically funds and investing in things like pensions, to drive wealth across every segment globally. As head of digital and design, it's mostly my role to actually drive a very traditional business that's done the same thing for 75 years to start doing things quite differently. And in many cases, that's using things like digital, which feel quite alien to a very personal business, but also adopting design to solve business problems and challenges in that space. My background is a combination of product development and working then more heavily in the digital space and looking at services there. I've always worked in relatively complex businesses, but really I got my teeth into kind of the mobile industry fairly early on, so developing services for things that were very new to individuals, and the concept of financial well-being is something that's still very new to lots of people. We don't take care of that as much as we should, often because it feels like a complex environment. So that's why I moved into financial services, because I believe it's doing well for people, but helping people work through quite complex situations.
Great, thank you very much. Now, our format for this afternoon is a fairly straightforward one. The three of us are going to have a conversation. And we're hoping that that will prompt questions from you today. Do put those into the Q&A element of Zoom. I'm sure you're all familiar with that at the moment. And it's something we've had to live with, isn't it, for the last 18 months. And we'll come to the questions at the end of the session. So do that. The other thing, just to let you know, is that we're recording this. So this will be something that is available to members on the DBA website, probably from tomorrow or the next day. So if at any point you drop out or you want to go back over something, then there's every opportunity to do that. It may even be something, a resource that you want to share with the rest of your team, and play it in the studio, perhaps have your own Q&A within the studio afterwards. So I think let's get out of the starting blocks. Olivia, perhaps I could start with you. From your own industry perspective, where do you see design currently having the biggest impact, and where do you think the opportunities are for design in the financial sector?
I think the financial sector overall is still pretty immature in the use of design across the board. I think it's still in what's a relatively superficial position of looking at either physical interactions or, in the digital sense, like how you interact with a website. I think what we've been trying to do, certainly within our space over the last 5 or 6 years, is think about design in a different way, and almost not calling it design, the thing that we're doing. It's like we're actually here to just solve a problem. How do we do that using the skills we have? I think the opportunity space in financial services is vast. The opportunity to think about design in a different way, solving business problems, but working around the complexity of the industry that we work in. Not just solving problems in how you do business and how you engage with your varied client base, but actually solving problems in how you run your business, how you operate effectively. I think we're in a fortunate position that certainly within T. Rowe, we don't talk about cost savings quite so much. We talk about let's be more efficient with the work we do so we can actually do more. And one of the things we've been trying to help the business understand is that you can use creative disciplines to achieve those things. So across the board, low maturity, but lots of opportunity and appetite as well, which is key to success, obviously.
Great. And would you say that it's a difficult case to make, or kind of are the ears of the boardroom open to this, given some of the changes that we're seeing in the financial sector?
Yeah, I think the last 18 months has had a huge silver lining for us as a set of disciplines. It's really demonstrated where things like experimentation or things that come naturally as part of design processes have really helped us to evolve, overnight what would have taken us historically maybe 5 or 6 years. So I think things are better, but it's still a hard conversation to be had, because if you work in a numbers business, it's the numbers that count. So the proof of what you're doing is still fundamentally needed. And like I was saying, calling things a design process can often work against us. So it's being smart and attaching yourself to the context of that business and saying, how do you position what you do in such a way that they get it, they understand how it really drives value for them. So ultimately, a lot of the conversations are around talking about business value. How do you derive business value from the work you do, rather than, I think, talking in an academic sense about design per se. It might feel quite masked and a little bit, manipulative, but I just think it's about connecting with the audience better around helping them to understand what are the crazy things we're talking about and how they actually could help drive value for the business.
The irony is it's design, isn't it? It's finding the mechanism with which you're going to be able to engage with a particular set of stakeholders, be it to make the case or whatever it might be. Cheryl, first up, the industry sector that you'd be in, is it manufactured goods? What's the broadly, if you were being pigeonholed by government, which sector? It must be something like manufactured. I was thinking, where do mattresses go? But it must be manufactured.
I mean, mattresses go there, but we sell a whole range of products, and we also retail other people's products, and we have a load of digital content. So
right. So retailer.
E-commerce retailer is normally what we get described as, albeit we also sell products with physical partners. So about 20% of our business goes through people like Next and Argos and stuff. So therefore we're a manufacturer. So it is quite difficult. I mean, we talk about ourselves as being a sleep retailer.
A sleep retailer, right? But that's I'd buy that. And where do you see
most people would?
Yes, I would just wish I could be asleep now. So where do you see the opportunities in your sector? What have been the opportunities, particularly, I say, perhaps coming out of the last 18 months?
I mean, our sector only exists because of design. So I always find it's a hard question where the opportunities, because the question is, well, what there is no business without design. The opportunity, well, our business is, because we're a startup business, because we're a sort of challenger brand. The business was created out of innovation in design, innovation in both packaging design and also route to customer and customer experience. All those are designed processes. That is why the business exists. If those things hadn't happened, the business wouldn't be here today. And therefore, as we innovate and grow, we never talk about design because that's all we are. It's like talking about the air we breathe. I mean, our every conversation is about different products, different packaging, different customer experience, different digital experiences, different advertising and communication strategies. That's all we are. We don't have, we are a front end business. So we don't talk about, supply chain efficiencies or manufacturing, because we don't possess those things, or raw material sourcing. We're all the front end business, and the front end of any business is basically design.
Yeah. And does it sort of inculcate every role in the business, or are there a team of people that are responsible for making sure that that type of an outlook applies across the whole organisation?
In every role in the business. I don't think there's anyone that doesn't have that sort of thinking, because we are a young business. So young businesses are sort of built from first inception on design principles. They're built from how can you be efficient in your touch points, how can you test and learn quickly, how can you be creative in your solutions, how can you understand human behaviour. And we are I was thinking, Olivia was saying they're a numbers business, we're a human business. So our entire mission is to help people sleep better. And a lot of the conversation we have all the time is, whenever we see a number, is what human behaviour is it indicating? What does it mean? What human action is this a symptom of? So even if you're looking at our marketing, if people are clicking on that advert versus this advert, that number in and of itself is not useful unless we think about why and what's the human behavior that's driven that decision, so we can iterate off it. Young businesses are incredibly iterative, and that is inherently sort of design thinking.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, we really couldn't be looking at two more different sectors. And so is there a design function within the business? Yep. No, it's everyone's role to
everyone. I mean, even the finance team are constantly thinking about how they re-engineer finance processes to be more efficient across the business, and they use the same approach. Get people in the room, you know, what's your option? You know, test and learn. And it's not so particularly reflected on being the case until we now talk about it, and then I reflect on this compared to historic businesses. But because we have no baggage, because there is only 6 years of history in the business, everything is always in development and therefore in design.
And where has that design ethos come from? So when you, the example you gave is a great one, actually. You've got a finance department who test and learn. I mean, it's kind of an oxymoron for most people.
Because there's a blank sheet of paper. So actually, if you take everything away from everyone, if you put a set of people in a room and give them a blank sheet of paper and say, work something out, instinctively everyone will go to a design process. That's because the design process is the human process of innovating. It's, well, let's think about the problems. Let's think about how we might solve those problems. Let's test some different solutions to those problems. Let's stand back and think creatively about what we're doing here. Let's have another go. That is the design process. And this business is a blank sheet of paper, relatively speaking. And therefore, when we go, right, how do we do a more efficient PO system? The people there have to go, right, well, the only way to do it is to get in a room and talk about it and work it out. There is no, well, what did we do 20 years ago, 30 years ago? You know, what does Mrs. Jones think? We just don't have that to fall back on. So you have to design.
Olivia, you're hearing something that is probably music to your ears in terms of a CEO-led approach to design that means that the whole business is buying into it. You're in a different situation. You've got a newly formed design team. How do you make the case for design into an organisation that is run differently?
Yeah, I mean, all the things that Cheryl talks about are the kind of North Star for us around levels of experimentation, giving people the freedom to problem solve using creative skills. Working from a blank sheet of paper is just never a scenario we will ever be in, because there's always a baseline to work from, and that's often something that's highly integrated into the business. I think one of the challenges for us is we're a really successful firm, and that's down to the investment product that we build and deliver and the performance of that. And it's really challenging to convince a business that you can change your ways and actually be even more successful, but the measure of success might be different. So your assets will increase in the financial terms, but actually you could create a completely different outcome in terms of the conversation or the relationship with people. And we're still a highly people-focused business. In fact, it's people because it's manual, as opposed to people because we're doing it in a people-centered way. So convincing and driving that level of adoption, it's very slow pace through an organization of this scale, trying to transform. Like I said, we have processes in our business that have been there 35 years and no one questions it. It's like, this is how we do it. We go from here, we go to here, we go to there. Why would you want to do that any different? Well, because we could probably save time, or it might be a bit more of an enjoyable process. And a lot of it is really down to proving. So we've deliberately established locations across our firm where people have the mandate to work a little bit more independently of the organization in almost like a stealth way, so that they can build out experiments, they can prove the value of what we do, and we can help people understand it. So it feels quite different when you're going from a process that's highly repeatable, everybody understands it, done it for 35 years, to we're going to do something really quite different. And being able to help people understand that is the only way we can do that is by driving case studies through the business, demonstrating, look, we used to do it this way, now we do it this way. We got to that point by doing these things, adopting a design thinking approach, and these are the value outcomes that we've delivered. So we're seeing client engagement go up, we're seeing diversity of engagement go up. So for us, diversifying our business is critical. And if we can demonstrate that we're driving towards those business goals through the approach, then that's really the tipping point where people say, okay, you're not just talking about something over there that feels like a different function to us. We're not a design firm. You're actually talking about solving our business problems and moving us forward as a business in the direction that we actually want to go. So it's constantly connecting what you're doing back to the desires of the business and ambitions, and helping them to realize if you did it in a different way, you could actually achieve a far different outcome that's successful. So demonstration for us has been absolutely key. Otherwise, it's just a very different, sometimes feels quite an intangible thing to buy into if you haven't been through that process before. If you've not been in a design thinking workshop, that just sounds like a load of old gobbledygook, quite frankly, to an investment professional who has a highly analytical way of dealing with his business problems. So really demonstrating, getting them in the room, participating, has been a really key factor for us. And that's at all levels. We've had to have our management committee involved in that process, because then they fully understand what it is we're trying to drive towards. So demonstration has been absolutely key for us.
And what have been some of the techniques, or physically, how have you been able to demonstrate that back to people? I mean, has it been an email in their inbox to say, you did this, we did that, look what it added to the business? How do you go back with the evidence of, the investment you made in this was worthwhile?
Yeah, often it is a client outcome. So you'll derive, a set of capabilities or products, and you're delivering those into small regions where the risk is low, and you can get away with it sometimes. That has to be just has to be how we work to try and experiment. And then the proof will often be in the case where the distribution teams will come back to us and say, well, if I hadn't have done that thing you told me to do, or used that product you told me to, actually the outcome would have looked like this. I'd have needed to spend X number of hours, gone through 20, 40 systems to do the job, but actually I did it in this length of time, and I nurtured that client to the next stage of the journey. So it's often getting someone else to voice what the outcome was, rather than us going, we did this. It was them saying, it made a real difference to my day, and it allowed my clients to do their job in the way that they wanted to as well. Those are the real differences. There are other things where you just have to, shout the numbers. So we've done a huge amount of work this year around building out a design system. Thinking about design systematically is something that a big corporate actually welcomes. They say, oh God, there's structure to what you do. Great, I like that. Show me how that works. So starting out by saying, we've got 160 ways of illustrating this, an article on our websites as an example. Actually, you should only have one of those. Why do we have 160 variations? So going from 160 to one and saying, look, we're just delivering one, and the operational efficiency of doing that, then the numbers win them over. So it's lots of different stories to demonstrate very, a whole variety of things that the design process can help us with. It will hit different people in different ways. So our finance guys love it when you say we've gone from 160 to one. Our sales teams and the heads of the sales and distribution teams love it when you say a client's actually now considering a whole different suite of products they never would have looked at before. So it's hitting again those business objectives, the things that matter to those individuals most.
Brilliant. Cheryl, if I can come to you, you've actually been a judge on our Design Effectiveness Awards, and you've won Design Effectiveness Awards. So you've seen things from both sides of the fence. What do you think it takes to make an award winner? What's in terms of your experience of the awards, and what advice would you give to people watching who are embarking on that entry process, perhaps for this year?
Well, let me come to that at the end of. So I just want to respond to a little of what Olivia was talking about. I think there's two things in selling in design thinking into a business, in my experience. So whilst the business I'm in now today is design led, I mean, I've most of my career in business that are not. I'm a big, ugly, boring, 150-year-old, can't do anything for processes. And my God, if you've got long process, Olivia, you should go and talk to the AA. I think there's two things. One is opportunity cost. And I think and my background is psychology, so I have a bit of fascination with this. Human brains have got a loss aversion, and they never look to the lost opportunity. So if you can flip the conversation, instead of being, what is the risk of doing this? What is the loss, the risk? Instead, going, the opportunity cost is we're missing out of what we could have. So every hour, day, weeks, month, year spent discussing this thing and not getting this thing live and in test is lost income potentially. So sort of turning that intangible benefit into a loss and using loss aversion and creating a stronger opportunity cost is a really powerful way of selling it. And the other thing is that, you know, as businesses grow and become more complex, and particularly just naturally over time, but particularly as businesses grow, and growth is what all businesses are looking for, businesses develop more and more entropy, more and more complexity, which is unwanted complexity. And eventually a business will tie itself in knots, and it kind of grinds. And if you look at history of almost any organization, they have this growth and then freeze and often contract. What's really going on? And the business has almost got so complex that it's frozen itself in a tangled web of spaghetti. And everyone can feel this in the organization. It's incredibly damaging to culture. So your cultural pattern is one of growth and everything's fantastic. And then suddenly people start to get frustrated because they can't do anything, because it's all, the growth has created a tangled knot. They can't move forward. So design thinking then I mean, pretty much any business will have simplification somewhere on its mantra, whether it's a purpose or a culture or a way of working. Using design thinking to really cut through that entropy and to go, right, we're going to take 5 processes or 10 processes, the processes that are most constraining this business, and we're going to redo them, because what you're going to get out of it is a simpler business. And again, talking to the benefit and the opportunity cost, rather than sort of trying to sell things intangibly, which I totally agree with you, Olivia. It's very hard to go, look, I promise it'll be better if we just go through this process, guys, come with me and cross your fingers. And so that takes me then to sort of award winners, because I think where you see those two things, so effective award winners are obviously where they can demonstrate strong business impact. It's a commercial award. But I think what's really interesting is where that design, the most powerful award winners are where design thinking has cut through the crap, where the business has been struggling or has failed to do something or has been unable to pivot or shift or move. And then design thinking has allowed them to either open up an opportunity to remove the opportunity cost they were facing, or indeed simplify and cut through something and let the business suddenly kick on. I think most of the award winners we saw, certainly last year when I judged, were very much in that space of either going, look, we saw an opportunity, we were able to use design thinking to really take that opportunity forward and think about it differently, or the business was here and the whole world had gone over there, and we were really struggling to pivot and change and move the business because of the constraints and the inertia in the business. And design thinking is a brilliant way of doing that.
And Cheryl, if you were someone who's sitting listening to this, wishing they were working with a company like yours, but in fact they're looking at the company that's got the 10 knots in the system that holds it back, how would you, I mean, might you use the case studies to try and illustrate that? How would you try and make the case, particularly if you're not someone who works for the business, but you're maybe an agency who works into the organization? How would they make the case for changing this, the outlook? How do you persuade a business?
I think it's really simple, and be careful what you wish for. So working in a business like ours is fantastic, but we are loss making. So the reason we are design led is because we have the burningest of burning platforms, which is if we don't get
the burning platform.
Yeah, I mean, literally, I can feel it around my feet all the time. So if we don't find the way to be better than our competition, and we don't find the solutions, we won't continue to exist. So it's very easy. Like if someone says, right, we need to solve this, we need to get a room and solve, people are like, yes, of course we bloody do. Not a question. And I think what in a lot of businesses, the challenge in selling in design and thinking is there isn't enough of a burning platform. So it's much easier to Olivia's point, to continue with the process that you've had for 35 years than to go through all the upheaval of thinking about it, getting a room and stretching your mind and lifting your head. So I would say to anyone trying to sell in a design process, I mean, you should be selling a design process because there's a burning business need anyway, or else you're on hiding to nothing. But it's how do you create an absolutely burning platform? How do you lay out a picture of the future that says, if we do not tackle this, this is what the world will look like in 2 years for this business, or 3 years, or 1 year, and put the fire under people's feet. Because when you put the, as I say, if you put people in a panic situation or a difficult situation, say go solve it, they will use design thinking, right? That is absolutely what any team of people will do under you need to get across this river or else the lion's going to eat you situation. So you need to put people in that position. It is very easy, if you're comfortable, not to go through it.
Yeah. Olivia, that would suggest that designers need to understand business in order to understand what those issues are. How do you get your designers to understand that, or the external partners that you're working with? How much time do you afford them to get under the skin of the business?
Yeah, it's absolutely crucial that the depth of domain knowledge and context is critical to knowing actually where is that burning problem that could potentially get even worse actually, and how do you solve that in a really successful way. It involves a huge investment from our teams and our partners. We've adopted a very inclusive approach. We've had to, which kind of goes against the grain of financial services. You know, the locked out walls, keeping people away, is kind of the natural instinct because for security reasons. Obviously, you've got $1 trillion behind your wall. You're naturally security conscious, but we've had to think about different ways to engage people into the business to deeply understand how does our business really operate, because it is quite different if you've not been part of even asset management is different within the context of financial services. So really allowing them to have access to our business, fighting for the fact that they need that domain understanding, providing them access to systems, just floor walking, sitting with people, watching the madness that literally takes place in some of these manual processes that are existing, and having really good access to clients is really hard because of regulation and lack of willingness from clients. They feel quite skeptical about why we'd want to talk to them. And our distribution team's like, well, we can't give you access to them because we might only get half an hour with this client in a month, and I want to spend it talking to them about a sale, not about an idea that you have. So actually trying to really dig deep into our distribution units to better understand what our clients are really looking for as well. But it can't be, I don't think you can ever know enough, is you never assume you've got to the end. You're constantly looking for the next piece of insight, the next bit of understanding. But it's been a really hard struggle for us actually to have that concept that you need deep domain knowledge within our design teams. And to do that, you've got to allow them in. You've got to let them come in and let them embrace the organisation and the organisation embrace them. That was probably the first 18 months of my job actually. Coming into the firm was just saying, you need more of an open door policy around this space. Otherwise, we're going to be spending a lot of money on something that's just not going to work. And the way to do that is to change the way we think about giving people access, the way we think about our partnerships. So we have a very much open door policy with obviously highly selected and vetted organizations, but it's very different to the mindset we had 6 years ago.
Fantastic. And Olivia, when you're recruiting people into your organisation, is there a certain type of designer that you're looking for? Is there a particular characteristic that you're looking for?
Tenacity is one. This is not, it's not easy and it's not straightforward, and I'm not saying it is elsewhere, but we're not in a place where literally every process people say, well, how do you do this? Well, they do their part like that, but for us it depends. It totally depends, because we're trying to drive change through the business. Everything is different every day. So looking for people that have just got the willingness to come on what will be a very long journey with us to drive the levels of change at a pace that might feel quite slow and antiquated in other areas. So the level at which kind of Cheryl talks about her team driving change, that for us is probably it could be a 2-year program for us. So having a designer that can work through that because it's the right thing to do and it's just the way our business is going to operate. Trying to work against that is where people fail. So if you're trying to drive a very different approach, it just becomes like it is like the COVID in the business. It's like people don't want that. They don't want to go near it, and nobody goes on that journey with them. So it tends to be people that have been in other organizations before, and they are looking for a deep design challenge that can really take on the role of helping us drive design through the business. But in terms of skill sets, it's really open book. It's very varied. We're looking for diversity of thought to help us drive through the problems we have. But over and above, it's like tenacity to stick with the process of trying to drive the change through at a pace that might feel a bit awkward and not so successful for others, but for us, that's just, that pace is good. That's driving good change through our business.
And Olivia, I mean, you've, if I can come to this as well, you've been a judge on the awards at least a couple of times. I think you're a regular for us, which is great.
Yeah.
What of that process and the understanding and the evidence of the role of design in other industries have you been able to sort of pick up on and bring back into your own business?
Yeah, I think there's definitely, we are probably one of the most immature industries from a design perspective. So when you look at the level of rigor that sits in other industries, the way they can measure pretty accurately the outcomes of the business and the design process, that's been super helpful for us, because we've really struggled, because ultimately it's the assets coming in the door that is the measure of success for us, but we can't correlate all our design work to a specific number coming through the door. What we can correlate it to, though, is lots of other things. So I think as I've gone through this process of, I think I'm now in my 4th year actually as a judge, is seeing how others are putting forward measures of design and how those are becoming more and more mature. That's been super helpful for us, because everyone talks about ROI and it means different things in different places. And actually, what I don't want to do with design is ever claim a success criteria that actually doesn't belong to us at all. It really sits with the person-to-person relationship that sits on the front line. I think that would be the wrong thing to do. We've contributed to it. We've actually enabled parts of it to happen, but by no means are we the point that drove that conversion. So I think using other industries and how they've measured, because they're at a more mature state than us, how they're now thinking about the measurement of design, the actual criteria they're using, has been super helpful.
Great. Cheryl, I'm going to break with what I said at the beginning about not throwing the questions from the audience in midway through, but I'm going to do it because we've got a really good question from John Gleeson, and it's appropriate to ask it now. So, and he's asking, in a business like yours, he's saying an agile business, where everyone is the enterprise, or everyone in the enterprise rather, is both exploring new and better ways to deliver consumer delight and exceptional experiences and execute and deliver your plans and operations. How do you prioritize the dozens, or he's saying potentially hundreds of ideas that are likely to bubble up? Do you, or can you experiment, test, pilot, prototype all of them? How do you decide what to go with?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a great question. So I mean, actually, we've sort of just designed our own process, obviously, our own way of working, and so we use a principle which is called blue chips. This is, I realise I should probably IP this at some point, but this is actually completely borrowed from a company we work with called Code Associates, who are a leadership company, so I stole their language. But we have in the organisation a number of blue chip activities, which are big, ambitious projects, which have a squad around them. And that is where sort of the focus is on new ideas and experimentation. And those blue chips are aligned with the core objectives of the business. So we know if we strike it lucky on those blue chips, that the business will be successful, because what we find is there's not a lot of point having a brilliant idea that's going to make a massive difference to a very small bit of the business and has a small commercial impact. It might be an amazing idea, it might be a wonderful piece of design, but it's just not going to make the boat go faster for us. So we focus all of our kind of innovation and challenging thinking, if you like, in those blue chip categories, and then the rest outside of blue chip activity, it's business as usual activity. And then we have a number of objectives that each member of the team will have their own objectives in business as usual, and within that there is a series of projects to deliver against that business as usual. But those things are smaller and able to be delivered with small individual teams, whereas the blue chips will need cross-functional and cross-business effort to deliver stuff. So ideas, there's lots and lots and lots of ideas. That's not a challenge. The challenge is going, which are the ones we are going to put the weight of the business behind delivering. And as a small business, that, if I come from bigger businesses where you have the luxury of being able to say, well, we'll pull 20 people out and do that. If I pulled 20 people out of this business, that would be half of the business. We would literally stop delivering mattresses to people. So, you've really got to think quite carefully about where you do throw energy in delivering stuff.
Great.
It's kind of a hybrid agile model, but not really agile.
And do you set a goal for the number of these blue chips that you'll try and
yeah, I mean, we did it the first time last year, and we got to a number which kind of, we all thought was too many, but we'd have a pop at it, because there's a level of going, let's have a pop at this and see what works. We're going again this year, and I think we know about the right number for the business to handle, which is about sort of between 5 and 7. And we have also a set of things that we are scoping, which will either become future blue chips or might usurp blue chips. So we have kind of blue chips, scoping activities, and then business as usual activities.
Great. And Olivia, you've led a lot of work within your organisation to review how you could be doing things better through design. Can you tell us a little bit more about the process, or it's really the barriers that you encountered, and how you sort of overcame some of those? Is there a particular function within the organisation that was particularly tricky to deal with? Big organisations have a lot of silos. Design sometimes seen as a siloed activity. How do you go from that the vertical to the horizontal, to the thing that could touch any part of the business? And is there a danger they just see you as meddling in their staff?
Yeah, so we this sounds crazy, but we spent about a year actually reviewing our operating model around design and digital. We wanted to look at it in the context of digital, partly because everybody's talking about it in the business, everyone's interested in it. And I think one of the things we try and do in our business is really tag ourselves along to things that matter the most. And that can be a business objective, but it can also just be a topic that everyone is talking about. So we sort of piggyback off those things. And so there was a decision that we wanted to review the role of design, but do it in the context of how we're delivering our digital experiences globally. We started out by actually inviting a number of our partners from across the firm to take part in that process. And while some of them initially were like, well, no, this is your job to do that, not ours. I think as we went through the process, what they realized was their role in actually driving the adoption of design and the value that design could offer them through the business. So that, I think, was one of the best decisions we took, which is a natural T-Rowe decision, because we're super collaborative, if not actually veering towards kind of consensus and community. But to bring them together at the table to say, come on this journey with us, understand the pitfalls and the challenges, help us derive a view of where we should be, and let's agree on a plan, and actually all hands on table, we're going to commit to doing this. And we did that from the outset with a number of senior people that actually felt like they were not against design, but couldn't see the value of it. So we deliberately chose people that we felt were kind of at the extreme edge of not being willing to kind of let us in and help them with the problems, and take them on the journey of thinking about how does this work in other organizations? What outcomes do they see as a result of doing that? How different is that to our capability model and how we work? And again, using more, I guess, formal business analysis type processes to just to badge what we were doing, to say, we're going to go through a really structured way of solving this problem, but actually we're using design thinking behind the scenes to do that. So the engagement process was critical to them participating and actually coming out at the end with a view of, we've got a shared vision of the role that design should be playing for us. We've got a shared vision of what the outcome is we believe it will derive for our clients, and a shared vision of how that's going to change how we work from an operational perspective, right down to things like some of our stakeholders saying, like, I didn't really realize what a pain in the arse I was, and when I did these things, how it causes you guys issues, and actually that stops you doing the things that I really want you to do. So it was a long process, but it was and actually, I have to say, going through it, I had to wear a metal jacket for so long, because the feedback was very much, well, you don't understand the business, you don't know how it works for us, you're just coming up with these things when we do it this way. So it was very much like, you don't know, you don't belong. But to actually just persevere, keep going through the process, and we've landed in a place where now actually what I have is a group of advocates at a very senior level who are sitting in other meetings saying, I know design needs to be at this table. I know it's the design team that should be driving this problem resolution forward. I know that design, that vocabulary just never would have existed before. So a year's worth of metal armor and just continuing to take them on the journey with us, I think has landed us in a really strong place. Lots of work to do now, because it is a case of like, yeah, be careful what you wish for, because now they're like, now we want to give you this time and this focus and this investment, and you have to turn it around and be able to do something with it. But we have reached a really significant tipping point as the result of investing in that process.
Great. We've got another question from Alan Roffey. Alan, thank you for this. And he's finding the discussion really helpful, which is great. And he said, can I ask what type of evidence or figures have you found makes the best impact or impression on colleagues and clients? Any suggestions?
I think we tie ourselves in knots on this too much. And again, to my point earlier on opportunity cost or indie burning platforms, there's a really nice principle of what needs to be true. So what do I need to believe for me to support this? What do I need to believe will be true? And I think when we business case things, we look for facts, which means we always look backwards. If you business case in the opposite around, you say, look, if we believe that by doing this, we will increase our speed to do X by 10%, or increase our conversion rate by 3%, or this new shape of business looks like that. That is a really useful conversation to have, because then you can have a conversation where we go, well, do we think design could increase speed by 10%? Because people go, oh, that's if 10% means ... you've kind of created this new little picture of a world where we're 10% faster at something. People go, oh, do you think you can do that? And you go, well, I really think we can. Yeah, that's a really good objective, and now it's concrete, and suddenly everyone is now in a world where the business looks like that, and they're looking to you to deliver it. So that I've found a much more useful way of selling things in, rather than trying to go, well, if you look at case studies, historically, people have proven that they've increased this by 10%, because then someone goes, yeah, but we're not them. So you root them, and that actually, yeah, so putting people in a what do I need to believe to be true is the way I like to business case stuff, and it is quite useful.
And I mean, clearly sorry, Olivia, were you going to say something there?
No, I was just going to say, actually, a similar thing for us is, yeah, not always badging things with like, oh, that competitor does that and that. It's like, well, they don't run the same lines of business as us. It's not, you can't compare. I think the other thing for us is like really getting people to recognize what current state really does look like. And they have this belief that everything's almost like perfect because it's been running for so long. And I think when you dig in and say, do you know what this colleague has to do in order to achieve that? When you're thinking about operational gains, and they go, oh, I didn't know that was the case. So sometimes it's actually being the bearer of bad tidings and saying, this is the reality of our current scenario. So then the opportunity to course correct some of that becomes really obvious, as opposed to saying, if we did things differently, we could end up here. Well, why do we want to do that anyway? It's absolutely fine where we are. So for us, a lot of it has been really peeling back the onion and saying, look under the hood at what's really going on. Because it can be very invisible. In a large business, lots of these things become very invisible because people have created their own workarounds for so long, and they've just made it, the problem is now institutionalized. It's not a problem anymore, it's normal. It's just a normal way of working. So digging under the bonnet has been super helpful, exposing that dirty laundry. Like, gosh, we didn't know it was like that really. So I think that's been a good factor for us.
And perhaps, Alan, if I can, so looking at case studies that don't relate specifically to the businesses you're working with. So there was one I know that we featured years ago in one of our magazines, which was it was a Norwegian based project that was looking at the fact that women who were diagnosed or who were suspected to have breast cancer were having to wait 3 months for a diagnosis. And they put the designers onto the process, and to cut a long story short, they got that diagnosis down to 3 days. And what they found was that there wasn't an issue with this, clearly not an issue with diagnosing breast cancer once you get someone in front of a scanner, but all of these systems and processes that had been built into the public services that deal with the women at the various stages had, maybe 5 days or 6 days delay in things happening, which added up to a period of 3 months, which is a very considerable period when you're talking about something that is growing inside you. So I think maybe sometimes there's the opportunity to look at those case studies that sit outside of the sector that you're actually operating in to help illustrate the point that I think Cheryl and Olivia have both made. I think the other thing, both of you will have seen this, from a Design Effectiveness Awards case study point of view, context is king. We're not able to compare one case study to the other. How much detail or what sort of level of understanding do you think that we need of the context within which we're operating actually to be able to do this really well?
To judge awards?
Yes.
I think you need to understand the problem. I mean, so context where it helps bring to life the problem, the impact the problem was having on business, customers, product, whatever the thing is. That's the context you really need. The wider context of intangibles in the market, unless they are core to the product, is much less relevant. I think the other context is really useful, is a sense of, well, for me, the culture so I'll give much more credibility to, or not credibility, much more weight to an entry where designers had to really pull against a culture, than an entry where it's like, look, you're a design-led business, everyone's a designer, this doing design is sort of in your bloodstream. So understanding the culture of the business, or the culture of the operating team, and to what extent design had to rejuvenate, work through, and operate that. I mean, Olivia's sort of tales of woe are heroic and are wonderful, and that's the sort of stuff you go, my God, that's good, hard design. That's not easy stuff, and it's worth acknowledging and bowing down to slightly.
Please don't. Yeah, I would completely agree, Cheryl. The understanding the problem space is so critical, and it shouldn't be assumed that we as judges always have that experience and context relevant to that particular case study. And I've found that, and I think that's where as judges you play off each other, because you're bringing different sets of expertise to the table. But understanding the context of your problem and will help you to understand just how significant that measure of success is for you and the problem that you solved. And if you compare it, which we don't, but if you did compare it to something else, it might feel really insignificant. But actually, in the context of, a culture that hasn't moved for 35 years, really, swimming against the tide, a market that's just absolutely slumped, or it's totally dependent on human interaction, or the man with the black book, all these things that are kind of, you need to know that's what you're working with in order to be able to generate that outcome. I wouldn't underestimate that, the value of that, and how important that is in our decision as a judge to say, this, in the context of this space, is a really, really great measure of success. And that's, I would, really advocate people do that in the process of the case study.
And question to you both again, how easy do you think is it to identify the objectives maybe from a numerical point of view, even before you start or embark on one of these, or are you keeping your objectives, I don't know, slightly broader in the context of how design is then manifest against a particular problem? Do you think you can be pinpoint accurate with what the objectives would be before you start?
I think it's a discipline getting to objectives, and I think you need to be. And I get very frustrated. I mean, I get frustrated with my team. So back to the blue chips example, when you get to a numerical objective which has got 94,000 contributors, you can't have that as your objective. You've got to go down and down and down until you're going to go, well, that objective, that is the one thing that you as a team will focus on, and that will contribute to the overall business up here. So I think, but it is a discipline to drill down, to go really, 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 if it is about, is it footfall linger time in front of shelf as opposed to just store revenue? How do you really get to an objective that you go, that objective, which will contribute to the business objective and store revenue or whatever it is, that objective we as designers are absolutely 100% focused on. And I don't think we do it enough. It's the same in marketing, same in all the disciplines, but that is how you get to brilliant design, is really, really tight objectives.
And some advice, Cheryl, into there are probably a bunch of designers sitting here nodding away saying, if only I could get that out of the clients that I work with. I mean, what does that conversation look like? How hard can you push, do you think?
I'm going to defer to Olivia there, because I'm the client, and that's what I push for. So I don't know how other clients behave.
It's hard. It is like pulling teeth. I'm just like, oh man, come on. Yeah, in our firm especially, because we are quite I think we're quite soft in that respect, that we don't put hard measures on a number of our activities. But we're becoming more accustomed to doing that because we're just running our business like grown-ups, really. But actually, it's really hard to get people to really keep thinking. We use the 5 whys as a good way of saying, but why do you want to do that? Why? Keep digging. And you become annoying to that point, but actually you start to get them to think about it. The other thing is to ensure that what you're asking them to do is in a safe zone, because often they can feel like, I'm actually going to personally be held accountable for that if I give you that, and that's what I'm worried about. Me talking as a stakeholder. And so it's to say, look, what this is for is to help us design a better outcome, to make sure that we do that thing. And so by you telling us that, share that secret with us, actually it will allow us to give you a better set of results. But I think it's a muscle that's not stretched enough in a number of areas. You know, marketing, distribution teams, they really struggle to just put their finger on the button and say, yes, it's that one. But asking the question, being that painful person, it's worth it. And if you can help them understand why you're asking that question, why is that important to you? Because you're more chance of getting a successful result out of us than if you don't. And again, context is really important with the number. So what does that really mean? What does that success measure really mean? So back to kind of what we were saying before, put context around the problem, but also put context around what will that look like? What would it look like to the different players in this process that we're trying to redesign, so that you really get a sense of, actually, I can probably start to allude from that what the next level metric might be down from that as well.
Olivia and Cheryl, this has been enlightening, and that's coming from someone who's been in the industry for as long as I have. I've been scribbling some notes without looking, so you have to bear in mind that my handwriting may not be legible, but a couple of things that really resonated for me. Olivia, your point about design being about solving problems, and maybe that's the language we need to use with people, so we're not using the design word at all. I'm not advocating yes or no on all of this, so these are just a summary of some of the thoughts that really struck me. The fact that you said that there are huge opportunities in financial services. If anyone's on this call and they're working in that sector, then that's going to be music to your ears. And the fact that design isn't just about the products and services, but it's about how you do business. It's inculcated through every aspect of the organisation, and we've had some fantastic examples of that this afternoon. Talking about design and the business value that it brings might yield better results for people. Cheryl, the fact that no business is a business without design. If we had more businesses that thought like that, then I think life would be peachy. We'd all sleep better, I'm sure. Definitely. Test and learn. Again, it's the things we're familiar with, but sometimes we just forget. How do we create those environments for that to happen? Olivia, you mentioned, locations that enable people, that give people the opportunity to be able to look at things differently. So those opportunities to work by stealth. I love the point about the opportunity cost. So looking at things in a very different light, and as opposed to the way that we normally talk about, or the mechanisms that we normally use for trying to persuade people to do things. The entropy in businesses, there's probably loads of it. If you've just focused on that, you'd probably find 10 projects in every organisation that we're working with. There was the burning platform. So that as a means of identifying those issues that need to be dealt with. There was that point, wasn't there, about the depth of domain knowledge needed to be able to identify problems, and perhaps you see more or less of that depending on the industry sectors that you're working in, but certainly a point to be noted. Access to the business. So this issue of actually how much designers need to understand about a business before they can exercise their creativity on an organisation. Floor walking, access to clients, those that are skeptical is the word I'm looking for. I love the idea of making those that are the skeptics the advocates for design. I would imagine that took some time. but well worth the time investment. There was that point, wasn't there, about making people look good, that you can't always lay claim to the impact you've had because actually it brought benefit to others. So it might be that your marketing team benefited as a result of a design intervention. You've just got to kind of give up the credit to the marketing team. Blue chips, that way of being able to address just some of the ideas that are bubbling up through organisations, and the types of squads that you surround those issues with, something to consider. The objectives within the business. We heard a lot about shared vision, getting people on the same page. We did hear about Olivia wearing her metal jacket. There's something about perseverance and resilience in all of this that is going to be prevalent for some, maybe less for others. If you're driving the culture, then that's something that in a way you could protect yourself from. And the context as it relates to the problem that we're addressing, and just that appreciation that I don't think I'd quite thought about this, that if you are a design-led organisation, how much easier it might be. I think the challenges are different in those organisations versus pulling against the tide and the cultural tide of an organisation to get things through. It's not a quick win, I think, is what we're saying. This is something that is needs to be worked on and worked at. And over the years, of course, you start to see the benefit. Cheryl and Olivia, thank you so much for your contribution this afternoon. It's been really insightful. Thank you to everyone who's stuck with us to the bitter end. Sorry, I've just gone over by a minute there. And we will see you all again at the next one. Thank you both very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.